Communication is the key. They need to understand upfront the process of the relocation. That's the key to it all, knowing what's going to happen. They need to know the transit time. If there's a delay that's out of our control, which does happen, they need to be aware of that. Whether it's air shipments or whether it's ocean freight, communication is huge.
Welcome to another episode of Relocation Leader. I'm your host, Zac Turbes, and today we have a special episode. We have Aaversal Global in the house, and joining us is Hosea Bottley, the president and CEO of Aaversal, as well as Mel Smith, the managing director of global logistics for Aaversal Global. Let's just start out with you introducing yourselves and tell us a little bit about kind of how you got into your position and the business in general.
Okay, my name is Hosea Bottley, President and CEO of Aaversal Global Relocation. I've been in this industry about 30 years. After getting out of the Navy, returned back to Seattle, and I decided, well, I need to find a job. I interviewed at Boeing, never got hired, but I had to find a job, and so I was looking through the paper. That's how long ago that was. And I saw Atlas International was hiring. I went down and I got hired at Atlas International, started out as a GSA coordinator, learned a lot, worked there for 3 years, and decided I wanted to get into sales. Eventually got hired on at Mitchell Moving and Storage, an Atlas agent here in Seattle, and worked my way up. In 20 years, I was the president of the company. I helped build the international department. And so one day, I'll be honest with you, I was looking at the P&L and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Why am I doing this? Why am I not doing this for myself? And believe it or not, I went home the same day. I told my wife I was going to quit my job and open my own company. She thought, of course, I was crazy. I was having a midlife crisis, but she got on board and she supported me. And I opened Aaversal Global Relocation in January 2017. And here we are today. I just love this industry, man. It's just an amazing industry. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
That's awesome. Mel?
Well, I'm Mel Smith, and I am the managing director of global logistics. And like Hosea, I'm 30 years into the industry. It's a great coincidence. And I started out actually in New York in the industry. I was an insurance broker, licensed in profession for third-party liability for Fortune 500 profile type organizations. I was always fascinated, though, with the international and the ocean marine divisions. And I went for an interview for a company that was a shipping company, advertised a shipping company. And I want to tell you how long ago it was, just to give you an idea. It was in a newspaper, an advertisement for a job in a newspaper. If you can remember what those look like, what those feel like, and what those ads were like, that's how long ago it was. When I turned up for the interview, it just so happened that on my resume, I'd been studying German for several years at the this recommendation or suggestion of some German friends that I had when I was at college, finishing up at college. And so I wrote on my resume that I could speak German. So the coolest things about the experience was the company gave me a geography test in my interview. Never had that happen before, never had it happen since. And I did well on the test. I only think I got one wrong. That was where the port city of Norway was, which was Stavanger or Stavanger, I guess, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And then the president's assistant, I can tell you, I was sweating during the whole interview process because I was listening to her speak, and I think this woman's either Dutch or German. It turns out she was like in the western part of Germany, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm like, she's going to make me speak German. I know, and I'm sweating. And then I took the test, and she said, hey, the president wants to talk to you. And she's German. So I walked into her office, and I spent the first 5 or 10 minutes speaking German with her. Just conversational, very, looking. She looked at me and she goes, you speak better German than my husband. He's an American and he's lived in Germany, but I think we could use you in a different capacity. Ever think about working in sales? And once again, and as a reflection of my age, I was like, wow, sales and shipping, that's like Aristotle Onassis stuff, right? I'm thinking billionaire, tycoon. I was like, wow, that sounds a great idea. But I really didn't give it a more than just a kind of just a passing thought. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. And so Weeks later, they called me up for another interview because the owner of the company was traveling. And when I walked into his office, the receptionist greeted me, and then she said she excused herself in about 5 minutes after me sitting on the couch, saying she had to go to run an errand or step away from her desk for a moment. And I popped up out of my seat and I ran over to her desk while she was away. I'm looking for clues. I don't know what inspired me to do this, what was going in my mind, but I thought I needed something to try to see if I can, have a conversation. And I saw the phone roster, the top name of the phone roster. Like, I was like, wow, how many people could have that name? And so I sat back down like nothing had happened. The president's assistant came to get me and bring me into the office. And she said, Mr. So-and-so is ready to see you now. And I looked at her and I said, is this first name so-and-so? And she goes, how did you know that? And I thought to myself, oh my God, how could this be? So I walked into his office, he introduced himself, and I said, is your first name so-and-so? He goes, yeah. And then I said, do you live here? And he's like, yeah, I have a house there. And he goes, and I just started to describe the property. After about 2 minutes, he's looking at me with his mouth agape and he goes, how do you know that? And I said, well, the first summer out of college, I was working for a tree service company in Westchester, and we went to your property like numerous amount of times. And I said, that was 10 years ago. You're the only client's name I remember. And he hired me on that spot. So from there, I got an opportunity to live and work in Germany for about 3 years, driving trucks and learning the business from, the ground up. While I was at the previous company, I wrote their first quality manual, ISO 9000 manual. So I learned the business in theory and then practically from the production side. For about the first 10 years in the business, I worked primarily in household goods relocation and served on the GWRC committee as the program chair for a 2-year period there. And then about 20 years ago, I started working for an organization in the DC area that was primarily focused on humanitarian logistics, working for USAID contractors, organizations like Save the Children and organizations of that nature, trying to help people improve their lives and sustain their lives in some of the areas that are either have a difficult, challenging infrastructure, or affected by war, sometimes humanitarian crises. So fortunately, during this process, I met Ben over those last 20 years, and he kept on telling me about this guy, Hosea Bottley, over the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm like, I'm really happy where I'm at. And, I don't want to change careers at this point. And it just, we talked, his name came up a couple of times, and it just turned out that we had an opportunity then to connect. And I'll let Hosea tell you that story if you have enough time on the podcast. But it was like meeting, looking at the reflection of who you are on the inside, and if that's possible, or an MRI of yourself, if you will, and recognizing that's me. And it was like an instant connection. And you can't catch lightning in a bottle twice, they say, but it seems like that happened. And we spent the better part of an entire day with each other that was only scheduled to be an hour. And we kind of knew there was something special in terms of us trying to connect up and work together, at least from my perspective. I hope he still feels the same after listening to me talk for so long, but that's the story.
Yeah.
That's how it happened.
Like I said, Ben trying to connect us. Ben Cross been trying to connect us for the longest. And so once I got Mel on a Zoom call, and we just hit it off right away. We kind of had the same ideology, the same vision. And so we did a Zoom call the next day again, and we talked more and more. And I said, Mel, I gotta come visit you. So I jumped on a flight, I flew to DC, and we sat down, we talked probably 6 hours straight on strategy and opportunity, and he had other companies after him as well, We talked for 6 hours. We met again that night for dinner, talked for another 3 or 4 hours. It was incredible. And so the ball was in his court. He had Aaversal and he had some other opportunities, but thank God he chose Aaversal. And here we are today, off and running,
So you guys got to explain something to me. Okay. So you've been around since 2017, and I'm kind of blown away at like your scope, the scale to which you guys have grown, and just the strategy that is behind your business at this sort of nascent stage. Can you kind of go into just like what drives you both, and sort of like how you thought about building Aaversal up into what it is today?
Oh, yes. So when I opened this company, like I said, I was working for another company, and some of the ideas that I had, wasn't my company. They got shot down, and I thought, wow, we can grow this way. So when I opened Aaversal, my vision was to expand, grow, and honestly, I didn't even want to do domestic. I just wanted to do all international. But I wasn't in. It was about a year into it. RMC started reaching out to me. Hey, can you please help us out? Can you please help us out? Um, you already have the network in place. You got the agents. You got the trucking companies. So that's how I got the small shipment division. But from the international perspective, I've always had a strong GSA background. So doing government business was a no-brainer. So once we got our 3 years in, your company has to be at least 3 years old in order to get your GSA approval. Once I got the approval, it was an easy switch to get a lot of the companies or corporate government entities that I had. But in the meantime, we was already working with a lot of RMCs, doing a lot of corporate relocations. And so that's how that grew. Um, and then last year, about this time in August, I decided I wanted to go a different direction. I wanted to do freight. And so that has really taken off. We filed a lot of government rates. So we're doing a lot of GSA work on the freight side, and that's all domestic and OCONUS opportunities there. So, and I'll let Mel fill you in on what we're trying to do with the other, like the DoD and other opportunities that we're working on. We call it Project Freight, where
Mm.
there's opportunities there as well.
Yeah, so that's what Hosea was saying is like the background that I've had, a person who mentored me starting from 2005, he came out of an organization that really had um, a great infrastructure for developing business that was cargo, so DoD, DOS contractors, not necessarily directly with those organizations, but with the contractors, and how to make an assessment and analysis of moving cargoes from what they would call studies. And I'm not going to get specific about it because I don't want to share some other people's processes and what teachings, but about understanding how things work from an ocean perspective, from an air perspective, from a surface perspective, whether that's road, rail, um, uh, ocean craft, aircraft, understanding the process for clearing customs, what hindrances might be. There might be physical challenges like rail gauges being different or seasonal challenges or hindrances, and then working that and learning that process, right, to be able to speak to from a technical understanding of how to move cargoes into challenging areas. And there's a pretty small community of people who really understand and do this work. And I was very fortunate enough to be tapped by one of those experts to basically learn and just to study underneath them. And I think so. And one of the things that he gave me the opportunity to do was to take on tasks that were from ground zero, so to speak. There was nothing there, and build this infrastructure, find support, find agents, find staffing. And I got a bug in me for that, for coming into an organization or a process at the nascent stage, as the word that you used, and trying to help build that. It's extremely satisfying. And there's things about like Hosea that, for example, the organization that cut my teeth on with this, we worked with Hosea's former organization. So it's also kind of interesting that we never crossed paths. I mean, I was business development and project management, and I was out of the office a lot. But come to find out after we started, work together, that there was a connection there that we were not even aware of.
So just to satisfy my own curiosity, if you had to give like an elevator pitch over how to get, supplies or, shipments into those incredibly difficult areas, how do you do it?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I'd say, call me and I'll get on the call. I'll do the process. I'll tell you what you need to do. I'll have my CEO on the call so we can verify what I'm saying in terms of the organizational structure. But the thing about it is it's really an operational approach. The My mentor was a person who came from an operational background. And so if you're in front of a logistics manager, an operations manager, you can talk that and you understand the technical requirements. They start theirs, perk up. Like, I mean, I've had people say to me, okay, you can talk the talk. Let's get to your own operations department then and see if they are substantiating what you're saying. Because it sounds like you know what you're talking about. So we're not all things to everybody either. You know, I mean, there's organizations that have a capacity to do things at a huge scale. And we're not talking about being able to do that in terms of this gigantic thing. I think we know what lane we're operating in. Hosea brings an expertise to OCONUS locations, so outside the continental U.S., but it's part of the U.S., like Alaska, Hawaii, Guam. I have expertise in those areas. I'm working in those areas. Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. I think I'm covering pretty much Northern Mariana Islands. So the United States territories or states that have these challenges, you know, in terms of getting things to them logistically, whether it's by ocean or air, and then into remote areas. So it's usually conversational, you know, where we start to talk about that. But once you're using phrases like that, like duty exempt, you have to learn to know the language. You know, that's the thing that people pick up on pretty quickly.
So before we get too far, because I realized I kind of skipped over one of the most important questions. Can you explain sort of just for the general audience, like what does Aaversal Global do? And then what do you guys see as what you do well, like, you know, like exceptionally?
So Aaversal, we do government and corporate international relocations. We relocate their employees. We provide a door-to-door service, you know, which involves packing, loading, ocean freight or air freight, customs clearance, and delivery to residents. And so that's what we do, and we do it well. I think our main goal here and what I used to see was just the abundance of lack of communication. You know, I hate when a shipper calls saying, hey, where's my stuff? They should never have to do that because they should be already receiving an email or a text message or whatever form of communication they request. So we always ask, how do you want to be, what's your line of communication? If they say just email me, we email you, or if they say text me, text, or we can generate it through our system to send them a message, you know, because even if you create a portal, and we've had asked people all the time, would you use it? And they say no. People don't, I ain't gonna say they're lazy, that's the word I want to use, but they don't want to go through all those steps. They just want the information to come to them. So we try to do a great job of doing that. Communication is the key, I feel, in any relocation, because you got to understand this individual is already stressed. They got immigration things to worry about. They got so much to worry about. So we try to remove that stress on the relocation side, you know, answer all their questions. They need to understand upfront the process of the relocation. That's the key to it all, knowing what's going to happen. They need to know the transit time. If there's a delay that's out of our control, which does happen, they need to be aware of that. So they're not sitting there going, well, you said it's going to be here on this day, and now it's not. They should never be able to have to follow up with us to find out that, oh, it's now delayed. So communication is huge, whether it's air shipments or whether it's ocean freight. Communication is huge. So, you know, and sometimes when that happens, and it does, I'm not a happy camper when it does, because that means that our coordinators has dropped the ball. So that's huge for Aaversal. I just always felt that way. So we train that way, we build that way, we operate that way. Communicate.
Mm-hmm. You know, following up on what Hosea says, communication, because he also mentioned it without actually using that, but accountability, communication accountability. And I think the key that we're working on right now as well is that, because those would be our value propositions, but then integrating that with technology. Because it's the present and it's the future. So we like to think that we're forward thinking about how we want to evolve the organization. We're certainly at a point now, and after our 7 years, which is why Hosea thought 2 years ago, we wanted to have diversify the organization, bring on talent to expand our service offerings, and our big push has been strategic development and growth in terms of not only maintaining but developing our new client base, or advance our client base, and then integrating technology into that to make the process of the value proposition and the process an advanced process.
Nice. You guys may have already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So So is there anything about your approach that sort of challenges conventional relocation methods?
I think what it is really is that we've come to this. A lot of times we have an organization. I've saved assembled people with relationships that, in terms of the the client facing positions, have 150 years of relationships that have been um, developed, and coming from different segments and sectors of the industry. I think a lot of the times what happens in organizations is you become it's the growth is all internal, and which is not a bad thing. It's just that we're looking at a different way of thinking or a different way of approaching what we're doing. Um, and I think that could be where it is, because we had a company seminar earlier in the year, and one of the keynote speakers talked about the diversity in thought, right? Because the goal of every organization is to generate revenue, right? That just whether it's a not-for-profit or a for-profit organization, you have to generate revenue to sustain your organization. And for-profit organizations, it's certainly about being a profitable organization. And we look at we are proud that we're a diverse organization, but we always talk about our diversity being from diversity of thought primarily, right? So that's really what everybody's looking for when they talk about diversity. It's simple and basic to qualify diversity as an external characteristic. What we're really looking for is a way to grow our markets, to increase a profitability, and to expand our service offerings. And if we could really focus on quality of what's going on inside of people and saying, well, how did they do things? They've done things differently. Jose always looks at me and gives me compliments about my experience from a perspective of global and traveling and then linguistically. And I look at him and say, and find from a leadership perspective, he's for me very uncommon. So I think that to be able to be in a role that I'm in, to follow someone who's been successful for many years, run an organization, and is looking for to bring together a very interesting group and dynamic group of employees to basically start something new, and it's growing it and continue to grow it. I love that challenge, and I think that approach is what makes people really drawn to us as an organization. What do you think, Jose? I mean, am I missing anything?
Well, no, not at all. And I also think that trust is huge.
Mm,
Trust
mm,
is a huge factor,
yeah.
and it all comes full circle. So when I say trust, accounts has to trust us.
Mm.
They trust you. That's why they give you the orders. They trust that you're going to get the job done. Um, we have to trust our vendors. I have to trust all of my employees. They have to believe in me just as much as I believe in them. So when you put that culture together like that, that bond goes a long ways. I'm a firm believer in that. I know we've had several conferences and people come to attend our conferences, Aaversal conferences, and they just can't believe how much of a bond that we have as a team. Even though we're remote, we communicate. We're on the phone all the time. We're on Zoom meetings all the time, ensuring that if there's any issues are getting resolved. So that trust factor has to be there,
Yeah.
So it's not just one way though. It goes both ways,
Mm.
It has to come full circle.
What's interesting too is that, yeah, I'm looking at the business you guys have built, and just because you're newer than some other companies, doesn't mean you're any less experienced though.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So, I mean, like they may look at a company that's been around for, 100 years or whatever. How many of those people are still there?
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That'd be something special if some of them are still there, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
After, 100 years.
And
Yeah.
you guys, you have a ton of experience at Aaversal, right?
Mhm.
And to me, it says something that you did start something new, because to Hosea's point, the thing that drove you to start something new was an idea, right?
Mhm.
It was
Correct.
that these are opportunities unpursued, and I'm
Right.
going to track them down,
Mhm.
And so I think that's important to point out, that just because this is a new company, don't overlook it, because this was the environment that built that new company, and there's a
Yeah.
lot to like about that.
Thank you. I mean,
I find ourselves every time we get an opportunity or a new account, we find ourselves growing within that account. People are, what do you mean by that? Well, the first year you're getting, 8, 10, 15 moves. The next year you're doing so well. Now you're getting 30, 40 moves. Next thing you know, you're getting more and more because they believe in you. And that's the growth that I continue to talk about. With some of our RMCs, well, we're doing domestic, we're doing government, we're doing corporate international, we're doing the whole entire gambit for them. So it's because they believe and they trust in us.
You know something, Zach? A couple of things that I wrote down while you were talking, and were about the company, and I think what's a driving factor and why Jose and I were able to spend 10 hours the first day we met each other face to face and came away with that supercharge was that I do believe things flow from the top down, in terms of leadership, and you take on the culture of the leader, and it's important for the leader to establish that and have people follow it. But there's a sense of real of things that motivated me. Like I've always been in a place where I want to pay things forward. What I want to use whatever talents I have to have up the people be successful. I feel that's the way our culture is and that our organization is. No one is successful on their own. Nobody operates in a vacuum. You really need to be inspired by your leaders. And I know that's easy to say because it sounds like a cookie cutter thing people say, but when you're close up in an organization of this size, and I can tell you, when I started working for Aaversal, there are a few people that I hold in super high regard in this industry, and I consider them friends as well as former colleagues. And people who were coming unsolicited out of the woodworks to tell me to tell me how happy they were that I was with Aaversal and sharing great stories about their experiences with Hosea. So it's always rewarding to get that type of reinforcement and know that you're with an organization that really cares. And we've had we share stories even amongst ourselves about, and some of them are very inspiring. And we'll get to one of those one day that our director of domestic freight shared with us a few weeks ago that made you just go, wow, you know what? You got to give people a chance. Give people a chance. The next person you might meet you'll impact their lives in a way that you may never know, and they'll never forget you. It's about that interaction you make with people to help make their day. Whether it's a smile or a kind word or patience that makes a difference, that will make a lifetime of difference in their lives.
Zach, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a quick story that truly inspired me to open Aaversal, and I'll be really quick with it. Upon getting out of the Navy, I was diagnosed with high liver enzymes. And no one can figure it out. The Navy, said, hey, make sure you take care of this when you get out. So I finally got diagnosed with Crohn's and colitis disease. And so the guy tell me, the doctor says, in 20 years, you're going to need a liver transplant. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. 20 years on the nose, I needed a liver transplant. So in 2012, I was blessed to get that liver transplant. Didn't go as smooth as we wanted. So I ended up flatlining on the table twice during the procedure. But coming out of that and being able to open my eyes the next day, and I knew something had went wrong. I didn't know exactly what. I had this energy. They had to hold me down. I was so happy to be alive. I don't know what it was. I mean, all the nurses and doctors was like, slow down, slow down. And I was trying to talk and I had the tube in my mouth and everything. I had went through something that it's really hard to explain to this day. But I knew something had happened. And finally, after a couple of days, because the anesthesiologist kept coming to my room and sitting on my bed, and I'm asking my wife, why is this guy coming here? But what happened was he was trying to put in a central line, and he punctured both my jugular veins and arteries. And so they had to do another 3-hour surgery to repair that before the transplant, which was 16 hours. So that was, so living through that, coming out of that was my motivation to say, I'm here. I got to go for it. I gotta go for it. So that's when my wife got behind me. I didn't want to be that guy at 65 going, man, what if you'd have opened your own company? Where would you be? I didn't want to be that guy, you know?
Wow, man, dude, you didn't have to make me like you more, Hosea. Goodness. Oh man, dude. Now everything I say after this is going to be trivial. So thanks for that. You know.
Those are the things. Those are the stories that inspire life, right? Inspire your life. Life is about living. We've and taking those challenges, facing those challenges, and I say to Hosea because we going through some challenges. Coming on board, you recognize like you somehow everything worked out that you have all you need to meet the challenge, whether it's all the resources, right? And you think about people who don't have some of those. Maybe you have the money, but you don't have the time. You have the time, but you don't have the health. You have the time and the health, but you don't have anyone to share it with, right? And it doesn't work out for us all the same way. And so I think there's a certain aspect of being grateful for what you've got and then trying to make the most of this, which is a kind of a central theme that runs through our lives. As individuals and as organization, let's make the most of what we've got right here. And to your point, Zac, it's like I've been doing this for 30 years and I don't know where the time went. I was the same with Hosea. So we're bringing something to the table where we have to be very patient. We've had to, keep our head up, work through discouragement, not ride the crest of when things are going really well, but don't get down when that wave crashes and you're get beached up for a little while. You got to jump back on that. I'm using a surfing analogy. I don't even surf, but I love to watch it. I think it's a great it's a great symbol for life, and you got to get back up and get on that board and get out there, and enjoy it. But yeah, anyway, it is. That's why I think that's one of the things about Hosea that makes it so inspiring. It's a real lived experience where someone's meeting a challenge, and you just want to be like, yeah, let me get on board and do this with you. Let me come along.
All right. So now I have my next question. Okay. So you gave me an idea here. So you said that, when you woke up, you were immediately like, I'm going to build something, right? I'm not going to be the guy at 65 who is going to ask what if, right? So then like, what is it that you're building? Like from a leadership perspective, what are you building? What's it going to end up being, Hosea? And how are you going to get there?
Well, hopefully I can continue to hire the people that believe and trust in my vision. That's the key. Look, Aaversal wouldn't be where it's at today without the amazing employees that we have. And in order to continue to grow and build, that has to continue. The employees are the engine that runs this thing. It may be my vision, but if they're not behind me supporting it, their vision is nothing. So as we continue to grow and build each and every department, whether it's bringing on a new NGO account or bringing on a new government freight entity, we still have to plan, we still have to strategize and to ensure that we're still providing that overall amazing level of service that's required to keep those accounts. Getting the accounts is sometimes easy. Keeping it is the worst. That's the work. But in order to keep the account, you got to plan, you got to prepare. Just can't go out, grab 400 booths and say, oh, thank you, and walk away from it. We got to plan. We got to put a plan together. So we're always constantly strategizing the next opportunity. So when we get that opportunity, we don't blow it. We build it. We build on that. So your question to me is how do we continue? Where is the Aaversal going? That's an amazing question because people ask me all the time, man, you're almost 60. When do you plan to retire? Well, I can tell you this, not anytime soon. I'm having too much fun.
Where do dollars and cents disappear in shipping? Like, how do companies lose money on shipping, when they could just easily do something else and not experience that same loss?
Wow. How do they lose money? Well, I think some of it is just that. And I see some of these programs, you just shake your head. It's like, why are they doing that? We can show them a better way to run the program or but some of them don't want to listen. They want to do it. This is the way they want to do it. Some of them are set up for programs where they want to do lump sums. Why do you want to give all that money away for the shipper to go out, find Joe Blow the mover, and still come back to you complaining about what a crappy move they got for the less money that they spent? In this industry, what they're all saying, you pay for what you get, right? And what fears me is that when domestic or international, they go out and get someone that's not licensed. That means they can care less. And then you shipment get hostage. I probably get 3 or 4 phone calls a year from someone complaining, saying, "Can you help me get my shipment back?" I'm like, "No, I don't even know who you use."
You know what, Zac?
Auto carriers as well.
Yeah. From when I got into this business, right? I told you I'd come out of this corporate insurance broker. So what I was doing was putting together cash flow management programs for corporations that had a general liability exposure, a third-party liability exposure of $1 million, and then breaking those into installment payments, just like we pay for our homeowners or our auto insurance, or if you don't pay it all at once. Now, when you're talking about millions of dollars, that is critical, because that's just the third-party liability. It's not talking about the property and all the other pieces. So cash flow is extremely important, right? And it really is a finance tool. But what I did, and this connects to the transportation industry, was I would evaluate the company's losses and exposure from a general liability, what the product they make or service they offer, their automobile liability, what their fleet vehicles cost and their exposure and how many vehicles they had, and then their workers' compensation. Well, in the moving and storage industry, the workers' compensation is probably one of the highest liability, that and construction worker, because people have lifting things and are putting them down. They're working in warehouses with machinery, and also they have vehicles on the road. And you know what doesn't appreciate? Vehicles and the cost of your labor. So when you're walking into a corporation, they're saying, we want to cut and streamline these costs, or you have an RMC in the middle said, we want to take a percentage of this to fund the program. And you're saying, right, okay, but my labor costs go up every year. You want me to get men and women who wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get to work at 7 o'clock, to work 10 hours days, packing and lifting and loading, and retain that staff with decreased revenue.
Right.
How do you want me to sustain that? So it's hard, and I know this because I've lived it. And I remember thinking, how am I going to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get to work? And to walk, to take the train, to walk, to take the bus, to get to, when I was living in Germany. And it was easy because they had infrastructure in Munich, easier, let me put it that way. But it's tough. And, everybody's looking at ways to, you can create efficiencies through technology in your organization, but your computers and robots are not packing and shipping. You're packing your furniture. They're not export packing your stuff. So I think part of it is having the realization that we have to have these honest discussions with our clients and RMCs and saying, hey, look, these are the costs for labor. These are real costs. And everybody wants to do best and final. And a lot of times it's hard to assert yourself as a provider because you're not on the front line of the process. You're either dealing with an intermediary or you're dealing with somebody else who looks at the moving costs. And this is the hard part about moving, is that everybody can do it. Everybody can pick things up and put it on the truck. It's a convenience that we're talking about right now. It's a service that, let's face it, you get to a certain point in your life, like, I'm not doing that anymore. I think all of us have had moves where, like, when you were younger, like, we get some buddies and we're going to move. But you get to another stage in your life when you got, when you've got a family and you have to be devoting 60 hours a week to work at least, and everybody else has got to skip. Like, I can't do this. Right?
I feel like I hit that this year.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Yeah, it's tough.
And also, too, the industry hasn't been the same since COVID. The prices we saw before COVID, we'll never see again. Ocean freight, labor, those prices are done and over with. Those are gone.
Yeah.
I know moving companies call me up and say, hey, I'm sorry, I got to raise my labor rates.
Yeah.
I'm like,
how do you guys, knowing the industry like you do, create win-win scenarios for everyone then?
I just be honest with them. I mean, dead honest on how we can save them money, but I have to see the program first, because I've seen some programs where it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And them not knowing all the levels of services and the different services that's available. So we run into situations like that as well, like, oh, wow, you can do that, or maybe they want to do an air shipment. It's like, get away from the weight, give them a container size, and that's what you stick with. It's a lot easier to work with because 300 pounds could be a D container or 300 pounds could be an LDN. It depends on what they're shipping. But if you give them, say, you're authorized a D container, we'll take a D container out on site, and whatever fits in there, that's what goes. Now you kind of get to, you know pretty much across the board what you're looking at when it comes to air freight shipments. Depends on what country you're going to.
So you're really talking about the value of knowledge sharing, and how you don't really get to those amicable solutions unless you're willing to invest in the process. And that involves a lot of knowledge sharing, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
It is. And good counseling and what you just said triggered something that a thought that I had. I took a class when I was at school called Bargaining, Negotiation, and Mediation, and which was one of my favorite classes. And I think one of the things the professors said to us is you have to know what the party wants. What do the two parties want? And he basically used an analogy of kids arguing over a box of cereal. And, they're arguing over the box of cereal and said, what would you do? And there's like, give half of them or give half of them this, and they'll take the thing away. And I said, well, what if somebody wants a cereal and the other one wants the prize inside? Well, it's got to be a win-win in every scenario you're working with your customer. They have to, and that's where I think where people come away with a dissatisfaction, right? I know, and also people have to accept that sometimes the answer is no, or I don't know. So you really have to be able to counsel your client well. I think that's why I know Hosea does a lot of due diligence in selecting the right coordinators, because people always talk about how stressful this is. One of the most stressful events of your life is moving. And if you don't have a person who can find a way to relate to you, or find a way to ease the burden of what you're doing, that's such an important. The price can be mitigated by someone explaining it to you properly, what the value is and what you're in the transaction, right? And that's where it comes in the intelligence, in terms of having the information, that not necessarily an intellectual intelligence, but intelligence in terms of having the information, being able to speak with people in a comforting and counseling way, and show them how the best outcome is going to work for them by working with us and provide and be tired and try to be. I know it's hard to say this stuff and be tireless or be relentless in problem solving and try to be tireless. Go the extra mile for people. That's what they care about. That's what I do. That's what I care about, right? All of my services are pretty much the same. Your phone service might be the same no matter which carrier you're working with, but but the person who's on the other end of the phone when you have a problem with customer service is what makes everything seem like it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Dang. So when are you guys writing your book? And for real, you guys have been wonderful. This has been a fantastic conversation. And I could tell yesterday when we were doing our tech checks, this was going to be special. So thank you guys for coming on Relocation Leader. And we really appreciate it.
Zac, I want to tell you, thank you. And it's a two-way street. We learned a lot in the brief conversation we had about you. And it's really easy to talk with you. And it's really easy because you shared so much wonderful experiences in your own life. And, there's definitely a synergy there. And I wish you all the success. I think I really have enjoyed this, and it feels like I'm talking to a friend, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Zac, you did an amazing job, my friend. Amazing job. And thank you for reaching out to Aaversal and giving us an opportunity to speak. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching another episode of Relocation Leader. Once again, that was Hosea Bottley and Mel Smith with Aaversal Global. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.